Joel was an unusual man, as you know. One thing about him was that he was scrupulously honest, so that when he said something, it's because he experienced something. He was a man you could trust, a man you could learn to believe in whatever he said, a man that all of us who knew him found to be the kind of man that we all were grateful for. His words had a way of staying with you. They had a way of proving to be true. And all the books he wrote had a way of bringing that message to you in a certain precise way that when you read it, you felt, this man knows how to get me up into the higher realms if I study, if I work at it. I was very grateful for his teaching. It got me away from the human consciousness, partly. It got me away from the things I wanted to get away from but didn't know how. And I have a feeling that what Joel did for me, he did for all of us. There's no one I've met in this work at a higher level of it who doesn't have a profound gratitude for his sincerity. And tonight we want to continue as best we can with the kind of teaching that we could all depend on. It will do what it says it will do. All we've got to do is do what it asks us to do. And I'm hopeful that in the process we can come to a place that will be new. I mean new for every one, where we're left with a feeling that tonight I have reached a new height, and I can be sure that if I continue in the direction that I have been lifted to, that I am going to make my transition. This is the kind of class where we have nothing to hold back. Nothing. We're going to try for the fifth and the sixth and the seventh realms. We're going to lose our humanhood, or try. We're going to become more positive in our spiritual approach to living. We may be a little out of step with the herd, the human being who walks in a material form. But I want tonight to make an effort to do what we haven't done, to achieve what we haven't achieved. Let's look at man's problem as he stands where he stands today, and our own problem as we stand where we stand today. We are looking at people who are unaware or who are aware. Presumably most of us have a certain degree of awareness, which means that we know that the material world has to go. We have a certain awareness which tells us that I am spirit. And even though my neighbor thinks he's matter, I know he's spirit, and that I live in a spiritual universe. I think all of us are aware of the fact that we live in a spiritual universe. There's one big difference. It's enough to talk about it for some of us. And for the remainder, it's not enough to talk about it. You can be in a spiritual universe and know it, but if you're not practicing living in it, there's a great difference between the way you find the world, the way you face your neighbors, the way you go about your day. It's a totally different activity when you're settling into the spiritual universe and you're looking out at the people who you see and saying to yourself, every one of them is spirit unknown, every one of them is spirit to me, everyone is spirit regardless of what they say or do. And when you live that way, you're going to have problems, but you're going to have different problems than the people who walk in matter. Now we're going to start out with a knowledge that spirit is our name, spirit is what we do, spirit is how we face the world, and consequently, because we are spiritual beings, problems are not problems to us. We have the same things happen to us that other people think happen to them, but when they happen, we have a different way of observing what happens. We look on a certain side of the activity. We see everything from the light of spirit. We see everything from the light of God. And we stand in the midst of those who do not see it that way. And we are quiet. We are careful that we do not expose the spiritual light because it can be trampled on. And we are very careful, nevertheless, that we pursue our spirit without end. We translate everything into its spiritual value that we can. That is not an easy task, but when we do that, we know that we are making a definite contribution to this world. Let's begin on this level of feeling the spirit around us, of knowing the spirit is right next to us. Right where I walk is the spirit. What I breathe is the spirit. Everywhere that I go is a spiritual universe, and I am walking through spirit. Joel had certain things that he brought to our attention so that we were compelled to lift all those around us by this knowledge. And as we followed Joel's teaching, as we followed the principles that he laid forth, we abandoned other principles that we might have followed. And in due course, we came face to face with a principle that worked a certain way and took us through certain conditions that we wouldn't have been able to come through. In other words, the principles prove themselves. But still, there were things in our lives, and there are things in our lives, that even though we work assiduously with total recognition of principle as best we know how, there remain walls that we cannot crack. And we say to ourselves, when will the day arrive? When will I be able to do this? When will I be able to live from one point of view without making concessions, without bending the truth? What is holding me up? Where am I? If you're asking yourself these questions, we're going to try to find a reason for your problems remaining. We're going to find another reason that you can eliminate the problems. And the third is the big one. We're going to try to crack the barrier that holds us in a material body. We have to do this because many of you have studied many years. It's the same old thing, continuation of the problem. How do I get rid of this and how do I get rid of that? We can't have that anymore. We want to be able to meet every problem before it even starts. We want to be free. We want every problem to fall into a nothingness as we approach it with truth. We want to be the elect. And to do that, we're going to go back before Jesus. It doesn't seem possible to find something before Jesus that would help us, but there is. We want to go back to a woman named Anna. She was a very meticulous student of the Spirit. I believe Anna had graduated from this world, although she still walked in it. I believe Anna was in fifth or sixth dimension. And my guess is sixth. Her husband was a priest. She spent her day in prayer. It wasn't the kind of prayer, dear Father, do this, dear Father, do that. It was a prayer which was an acknowledgement of herself as a living spirit. Continuously. Anna knew she was the Spirit of God. She lived that way. She didn't mingle. Her group were high students. You might say they were avatars. She walked in that group. And one day, she reached the conclusion. Something came to her, not in the visible world. She was about 60. She was beyond the capacity to bear children. But when she took leave of her husband, he was indignant. He didn't know what was on her mind. She said to him, I'm going to go and disappear. I have some work to do. Well, he grumbled, of course. didn't like being alone, but Anna took off. What Anna did was most unusual. She intensified her work in the Spirit. She lived in the Spirit day after day after day. Nobody could live in the Spirit as much as Anna. There wasn't any materiality in her universe. And after living that way for a period of time, Anna returned, and although she was 60, beyond giving birth, she had a child with her, a babe. Her husband looked at her. He didn't know what to think. He actually was perplexed. She says, "This is our new daughter, and I have immaculately conceived her." He looked at her disbelieving. But it was his wife. He knew what she was. An honest woman. A dedicated woman. And Anna delivered a little girl. That's how Mary came into the world. It seemed impossible until Mary did it herself. At the age of 13, Mary, the daughter of Anna, conceived immaculately, conceived a son, immaculately. In both cases, no man was involved. No man was involved. Two women, the mother and the daughter, had children without a man. I don't think we think of these things. We're too busy. But of course you can see that we were being taught. We just hadn't thought about it. We hadn't contemplated it. It meant little to us. That's how Jesus was born, immaculately, without a father. And his mother was born without a father. And these are true stories. Now comes the big question. Who's done it since? Maybe Sarah and Rachel before them, but no one since. I don't know anyone who was born without a father. And yet, a man that we dedicate our lives for and to was born without a father. And we have never quite considered what that might mean for us and what we have to do to make our transition. And I assure you, when you consider this subject, you're sitting on the purpose of your life and the fulfillment of it. What was the meaning of being conceived immaculately without a father? And how are we going to find the kingdom of heaven until we are aware of what it means? You see, Jesus was never born. There was no birth, as we know birth. It was a gift of God. And when you look at it carefully, this may startle you, but it's going to lead to some strange conclusions which you will feel are strange, which you may feel are impossible, but those who will bow to these conclusions will find that it is possible for them to make their transition. So please hold your thoughts carefully. Examine them. Try to see that the possibility of birth without a father has to be something that happens in the fifth, sixth, or seventh realm, because it doesn't happen on the fourth. And in order for you to attain your transition, you will have to be born eventually, not as a mother bears a child, but you will have to be developed in such a way that your flesh is not formed from the womb. For that is not how we will go to heaven. Our function is to make the fifth level. We're in the fifth, which is soul. In the sixth, which is spirit. The seventh, which is Christ. There is no birth. There is no physical birth beyond the fourth realm. And you were witnessing in the Immaculate Conception something that only takes place at a higher level than the fourth realm. You don't see it in the fourth realm. And in order to duplicate it, you'll have to go into the fifth and sixth and seventh realm, in which you will be immaculately conceived. If we hold on to this truth, we can see something that is going to happen to us which will be quite different from what the world expects. You are looking at a level of consciousness called the world consciousness, which has to drop away. And you are looking at a level of consciousness which you may not even be able to reach from the fifth level. Because Jesus was the seventh level. And in the higher realms, we are not born into matter. We are not born of woman. As we dwell in consciousness, we will ultimately see that we already are formed of spirit in a higher realm, and that what we are here is going to drop away. We won't be born. We already exist. We already are. If you can accept that, you're on your way to finding that you are the living Spirit of God. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to raise our consciousness so that we come out of the form into the soul realm, and then learn of our spiritual selfhood, which already exists and is not going to be formed in the physical world or in any world. There is not one thing that you are going to do to make yourself exist. God has already given you life, and you are life, and you have to find that life. There's no development. The only development is to find who you are. This is a strange message at the point, because when a person dies, he can't. It's impossible. What he does is he lays down his physical image. Some people think he's dead. Most people do. But no man has ever died. God doesn't do things that way. God doesn't partially make a man and then kill a man. And this is such stupidity. Everyone who is alive doesn't show forth. Everyone is alive, including us. We are not visible. What is visible is not our life. It's our materiality. When we die, we don't die. We walk into another level of being. We come back in a new form, and we try again, and we keep trying, and we die again, and we come back again, and again, and again. Our function is to reach that level of consciousness which permits us to accept the life that we are. And you will find assurance of this as you go along, because you're going to go through the death without the experience of the death. As you move into the death, you won't know it. You move up and come alive again, and you start again. You'll always be improving your knowledge to the point where you feel you can handle the problems that the world faces, where you can look at war, hatred, inhumanity, many of the so-called negatives, and you realize they don't happen in God's universe. You're looking at illusions outside of God's universe. And there'll come a day when you can look at them in such a way that they have little meaning for you. They may have little meaning for you now. You find as your progression continues in the spirit, problems they just lose their meaning. You can look at any situation. It isn't your situation. There's a new you formed which can look at the world around you with the knowledge that it's not there. And with a confidence that you have been brought to a level of understanding which is not stopped by anything in the world. And this doesn't seem possible at first, but I find I can accept it myself, because there are certain things that happen to a human that don't happen to the spirit. And when it happens to a human, and you will recognize the human unreality. There's no way of explaining it at first, but you will find a way to live through the human problems in such a way that they are not problems to you. Everyone here is capable of reaching that level. There are certain things that get us down, certain things that turn us away, certain things that enter our consciousness. But the time is very short when you have come into your level of understanding. Then you look at the same things, and for some strange reason, they don't mean to you what they did before. You feel capable of meeting these so-called problems. You feel like you have been lifted out, and yet you're the same self. It's just that your consciousness has changed, and you can look at things that had been a great problem to you before, and you can look at the same things now through a higher level of yourself. And you say, I was strange, I was afraid of that. As you develop yourself, these things disappear. And so we start to develop the spiritual side of us. Always we have in mind, I am going to find some way that I will appear in the universe and not be born. I'm going to find some way that takes my birth away, but I still exist. I'm going to follow those two women who went into the invisible, came back with 2 children. I want to follow that a little more closely because there's a message in it for me, and I've got to find what that message was. It's a very subtle one, as you can see. The child was only 2 years old, and the great priest, the head of the priesthood there, got his assassins out. He went roaming the countryside looking for that child to kill him. But they couldn't find the child. And the reason was that this child was invisible. Because it was not born of physical birth, it wasn't physically visible. It's my opinion, too, that the mother was the same invisibility. But anyway, that's just my opinion. Well, this child was 6 years old. He was quite advanced. Now he was visible because he was equipped to be visible or invisible. Later, he did such strange things. He'd disappear in a temple. Disappear in a tomb. He'd go walking on water. He never saw the visible. He never saw the invisible. He saw this mirage. You called it Jesus. But Jesus was the invisible Christ. And the invisible Christ was doing all these things. There wasn't anything the invisible Christ couldn't do. And we are told that I and the Christ, I and the Father, are one. Is it possible that we are capable of the unusual things that were formed by Christ? How did he raise the dead? Is it possible that we can raise the dead? How did he multiply loaves and fishes? The Christ, we say, multiplied loaves and fishes. The Christ did every miracle that Jesus performed. The Christ was the invisible of Jesus. But the Christ is the invisible of you and of me. Is it possible that the Christ would not be capable of doing the same things that he did for Jesus? And we must answer, of course it's impossible. So then potentially, I, the Son of God, the living Christ, am capable of every miracle performed by Jesus. Suppose we begin to perform some of those miracles and find out if we can. There's only one way you can do it. You have to find your Christhood. And you're going to find your Christhood. Because the divine plan is just that. You cannot be one with the Father, which means I am the Christ. You cannot be that forever and yet not come into the awareness of that. And so you see, what you are going to do is to find yourself as the invisible Christ. Every individual on the face of the earth is going to be born of the Christ. That is, aware that Christ is his name. That's only a step toward the kingdom of God. And that's where we're heading. Now you say, oh, we're so far away from that. You think you are. What's the point of this book which says you're not? I and the Father are one. Don't you think it's the truth? What's the point of Anna and Mary both having children without a process, without a husband? Was it just for play or to teach us something? Can they be different than we? You see then? Your name is the same as Anna. Your name is the same as Mary. It's just the space between you has to be cultivated in your consciousness. That is the only difference, because Everyone is a child of God. And how many children do you think God has? One. Each of us is Anna. Each of us is Mary. Each of us is perfect, but each of us has a material body, a material mind. And that is our problem. It's not something that we have to feel bad about. It was meant for us to be at this level, and we have worked hard at living at this level, and occasionally there's one among us, like Joel, who steps up, and many more if you could see another level of consciousness. We are in the process of learning. And I'm quite sure that many of us feel that we are so fortunate to be in that process, because it gives a depth to life and a meaning that nothing else could hold. We can learn how to be the Christ. If it takes you 1,000,000 years, you're going to learn it. If it takes you 1,000, you're going to learn it. That's our job. We have to learn to be the Christ. And so we bend our efforts, because it's the inevitable truth. And in order to do it, we want to shorten the so-called time that it takes, the bloodshed that it takes, the incredible amount of ignorance that keeps us away from it, the hospitals, the wars, all of that. Just a vast network of the consciousness that knows no truth. The consciousness that is a victim, because it stands unprotected, does not go into spiritual awareness. Spiritual awareness, then, is the only way. There is no possibility of saving anything in your life that is not spirit. Everything you have will go. Everything you call your body will go. Everything you call your possessions will go. The only thing you will remain with is the Spirit of God. I'm sure that few of us realized that the passage which talked about the birth of Christ, which was not a birth, the Immaculate Conception of the mother and of the daughter both, is treated right here in our Bible, but we don't know where it is. And that's an important passage that I want to read to you. He came into his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. Many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God. Even to them that believed on his name. Now you'll see the meaning of that very soon. Which were born not of blood. See how the Immaculate Conception was not being born of blood. And that is the same kind of conception that is possible to those who receive him. But of the will not of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. There, see how the Immaculate Conception then is birth of something which comes from the will of God? This is where you connect up to the Immaculate Conception. And that's John 12 to 15 or 14. Birth not from anything, not from blood, not from man, but not even from the will of people, but only from the will of God. And did it occur to you that that's how we were born? From the will of God. That's how we were born. So it wasn't a birth, you see. Each of us was immaculately conceived. We can't remember when, can we? We were not born. Because all the people who were born before us for thousands of years, where are they? They weren't immaculately conceived. But the truth is that each was immaculately conceived and is alive now and will always be. Immaculate Conception is the only way you can live in the kingdom of God. Now, did you ever think that was going to happen to you? It already has. You're not going to be immaculately conceived. You are. You are a result of the Immaculate Conception, but not your visible self. Your invisible self is immaculately conceived by God, is always alive, never dies, never has a problem, never has a disease, never is in any way handicapped, does not appear in the physical universe. And that's why we're going out of the physical universe into the reality of being, we will find our immaculately conceived self. You are immaculately conceived, and no one can change it. And when you believe it, there is something that will happen to you. Let's try to imagine the truth. You get a whiff of what happens to you. If you could turn your mind off for 5 minutes, and look at this world differently than you do with your mind and your eyes and your fingers, no contact with the world through touch. Retire to your invisibility and be alive in your invisibility for 5 minutes with me. And you'll get an idea of the possibilities that await us. Because we are not visible creatures. We are invisible. It is in the invisibility of ourselves that our Immaculate Conception becomes known to us. And while you're invisible, just imagine that there's a torpedo coming through the water, It breaks, it hits the battleship, splinters all over, and you're invisible not only to the sight, but you have no physical body. As the Christ has no physical body. Now what are you going to worry about when a torpedo comes if you have no physical body? It's just in another world, isn't it? You're going to find that all of the things of this world have no threat. Death, disease, anything material that could jeopardize. There's no one to be jeopardized. The immaculate born creature doesn't look at those illusions, doesn't feel those illusions, is not tormented or terrorized by those illusions. And when you realize that you are an immaculate born, invisible creature, and you start to live in that invisibility right here, you realize how true it is. And you will realize that I can walk through the things that are tormenting the world. Nobody can touch me. Nobody can see me. I'd like to live that way for a couple of minutes. I've lived that way for more than a couple of minutes. I'd like to share a couple of minutes with you. Where did Joe go? Where do you think he's gone? Is he going to be visible again? Let's say no, that he's invisible. Now what in this world is a threat to him? The waves? The diseases? What can hurt him? Automobiles speeding down the highway? Something falling off of a high place on him below? See, there's nothing can hurt Joe from the physical world. And yet we know he's alive. Now it's possible to develop your consciousness so that you in this world walk in your invisibility. Oh, not 24 hours a day. Not right at first. But you can walk in your invisibility when the need is there. You can practice it for 5 minutes out of every 2 hours. And then when the need occurs, you find that your invisibility can become a reality if you have worked with it. You're not going to turn invisible just by trying it, but you're going to turn invisible when your consciousness reaches a level that it will not be converting the world into form. We start to do that now. We start not converting the world into form in our silent awareness that matter is not here, that only one substance is here. And that substance is spirit. You've got to get out of the unreality, which seems so real because you touch it. It touches you. Everything in this world is an unreality. Now, if we don't practice being in our invisible self, There's nothing anyone's going to do for you that's going to be valuable or close to admitting the truth to your consciousness. We have to practice I am invisible. And at first it'll be, who are you kidding? But you're going to find the day comes when suddenly it strikes you, I'm not pretending that I'm invisible. Suddenly I realize that I really am. I thought it was a game up to that point. I say I'm invisible. Then I go and say it again. I don't realize that I am invisible now. And in one of these little games that you play, something's going to happen, and you're going to discover, to your amazement, that you have been saying the truth. Suddenly something is not going to hit you that should have hit you. You're going to say, well, how did that happen? And there's only one answer for it. You weren't there to be hit. And you really were invisible. But you see, you're in the consciousness that makes form out of everything. You're in the consciousness that sees and touches and feels. What happens when 40 years later they lay us down in the grave? Then we feel nothing. We see nothing. Now, if we practice we are invisible, we will discover that we slowly find a capacity to walk in the invisible kingdom of God. It's not a game anymore. It's one of the 10th wonders of the world. Man thinks he's a visible creature. And man doesn't know that he's hypnotized. And I don't know how myself. But one day, this hypnosis for you has no meaning anymore. You may find you heal a thumb or a toothache. You find some kind of evidence that something that was a problem disappears. And you begin to think to yourself, you mean, oh, I can't have been hypnotized. Impossible. But the world is hypnotized, not just you. There is not a soul on the earth who is not hypnotized into the belief that he is made of matter. Can you find one place in the Bible where God boasted of making man of matter? Now, God boasts of making you of his spirit. Can you be matter and spirit? Do you see what a radical change is expected? God says you are his spirit. That means right this moment where you're sitting is a lie. And where I'm sitting, it's the same lie. We each have the capacity to inflict horrors upon one another. But what do we have the capacity for? Inflicting illusion upon illusion. Some of us have reared a degree of ourselves out of that illusion. Possibly you have, and you're aware of it. And if you are aware of it, you know the excitement ahead. Each of us is to rise out of the illusion of form. We can't go into the streets and talk about it. That's how you stay alive. There's nothing of you to die. Spirit doesn't die. The only thing that can die is flesh. Jesus stood before a man named Nicodemus. You must be born again. Can you imagine saying that to a man 2,000 years ago? Nicodemus was smart, an elder in the church and all that. How can I be born again? Well, may as well say it today. How can you be born again? Born of flesh is one thing, born of spirit is another. You must be born of the Spirit because you are the Spirit. We have a problem that has been on earth since it began. We have to be born again. And how are we going to do that? We have to know that we start off with the assumption that all we can be is spirit. We can't be spirit and matter. If you can't be matter, and you walk around in a material sense of body, it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? If we can't be matter, how can we give birth to a baby? We think we gave birth, but that baby's going to die, disappear. We don't give birth to babies. We find a way, just as the mother and the daughter gave birth to the Immaculate Conception. They didn't give birth, they conceived it immaculately. We reach in our understanding deep, and we reach beyond our understanding because it's not enough. We have to come to a realm of light. We have to find that light. We have to know eventually that I am the light. We have to make up our minds that I look material, I feel material, I weigh like a material. My friends know me as a material being. And my secret is, I am the light of God. There is nothing else I can be. I have every quality that the Christ demonstrated, and I can show these qualities to a degree as I eliminate the belief that I am a material being. And that's what I must dedicate my life to if I want to live. Otherwise, I can't get into the swim in which truth is the only thing that animates me. So now, a different kind of life becomes a necessity. I I am going to live as the light of God. And even though I may think I can't, and it's too difficult, why don't I take a second look at the teaching that Jesus gives us? Perhaps in his teaching I can find some way of walking in the light and not in the material universe. Why can't I start to study things that I haven't gone into for fear that they will be on me? Why don't I find some area of life that I convert into what it is? The living light. And in that area I apply everything I know to uphold a belief that this is light. If I find there is an illness, I convert it to light, knowing the light is what it is, not the illness that it appears. But it doesn't disappear quickly. I'm not going to change my opinion. I stay with what I know to be true, that light cannot be sick. The only thing that can be sick is the illusion. Light cannot hurt. Light cannot even die. Why don't I bless everyone I know with the knowledge that the light of God is the truth of Him? Why don't I bless my children with the knowledge that they are the invisible light of the Father? Why don't I keep that knowledge to myself while I'm doing it? That each one, whether it's my child or my husband, my wife or my friend, each one is the light of God, although invisibly. Suppose I had the knowledge that you are the light of God. Suppose I was around you a lot during the day, and I see you only as a light. I think of you as a light. I treat you as a light. I never accept you as anything but the light. Can you be sure that you wouldn't feel the difference? Know the difference, and then develop that difference? And then suppose, instead of you waiting for me to see that you are the light, you accept yourself as the light. And start now, or start before now. Have exercises with yourself in which you say, I am the light of God. And that's the truth. That's the truth. You know it's the truth. Why not stay with it a little longer? 15 minutes a day. I am the light of God. And follow yourself through the day. In that 15-minute period, see yourself going here, there, and everywhere, until you become aware that the light is doing it, not a physical being. Now that's an exercise you have to do. You have to convert yourself into the light. You say, this, I feel too heavy. Oh, come now, the light can't be heavy or light. I don't feel smart. That's not the light. The truth of the matter is that all the things you think you are, if you don't think you're the light, are wrong. Because you are the light. Well, who's that walking down the street? Well, that looks like me. But I know no one can see me because I am the light. Now let's go into this. Let's cleanse ourselves of everything we think is wrong, because the light isn't any of that. And you'll feel like you've lost 1,000 years, truly. That you lost all the things that you thought were wrong with yourself. You thought, oh, that was a material belief. Not a word of it is true. I recommend that you convert your world into the light of God. The light is not handicapped. The light has no germs. The light is always who that individual is. The full light. And if you can know yourself as the full light, and anyone in your circle of friends, you'll find you have the capacity to extend it and know everyone as the light. But you're not going to do that overnight. But you can start. If I were with you and you were taking about 30 days of learning and practicing, I am the light, we would see in 30 days something that would happen to you. It's not that you would necessarily change your appearance. There was something in you that would be different. It would believe what it was saying. And as the belief deepens, that belief will have an effect upon the visible. Because the visible is only an expression of what you believe. Are you willing to try walking in the light? This is the way we are going to approach the Immaculate Conception. As we walk in the light and believe the truth of the light, as the Bible tells us to do, we will lose a certain degree of the material concepts of life. And in a flash, I imagine you've already had that flash, we will discover that everything is the light. There isn't anything in this universe that isn't the light. It's either the light or the illusion of form. Now you may feel that I don't have this and I don't have that, and my body is giving me problems and this and that. Suppose I were to say, you are the light. I don't care what you see and what you think and what you feel. You are the light. Now, can you practice it to yourself? Do you have to go out and broadcast? No. You know that God said you are the light. You don't need any guarantees from anybody else. God said you are the light. And I have never believed God. I've been too busy thinking I am the darkness. I am the mutilated form. I'm this and I'm that. But my Father, who put me here, says, you are the light of the world. The physical form is not there. The light is there. And as I know that I am the light, as you know that you are the light, you are helping to establish the truth in your consciousness, the truth that will outpicture the truth. The important part of this is, do you believe what the Father has said? Can the Father say you are the light and you be something other than that? You see the help that we can receive from the Father? The Father says, you are my son. You say, I am not. Look at me. If this is how your son looks, I don't want to be your son. Or you say, I can accept any word that the Father says. If the Father says, I am his son, then what I think of myself, how I look, how I feel, what I do every day, can't be true. Be reborn to what you are, instead of how you appear. I'm taking it upon myself, therefore, to accept the Father's word. What he means for one, he means for all. I am the perfect light of God. No matter what I have. If I've got cancer or a bad heart, or it's not true. It's only true because my consciousness does not uphold the Word of God. And maybe I don't know how, of course, and maybe I won't know how for a while, but it is the truth, and it is my job to live the truth. Now, we are all the image and likeness of God. We don't appear that way, but we are. And each of us must necessarily then examine himself. What is the image and likeness of God if it doesn't look like me? Well, it certainly isn't form that's going to die. So I've got some work to do. The form that dies is not the image and likeness of God. Now, after this form disappears, how am I going to establish the image and likeness of God? My work must be accomplished before the illusion of death strikes. When it does strike, I'm taken away, go through that burial, God knows how long, maybe quick, maybe slow, before I come back to start over again to establish that I am the image and likeness of God. And that's true for every single person. The quicker he learns it, and she learns it, and says that this form is not the image and likeness of God, the quicker he's going to say, well, what can I do to be the image and likeness of God? The trouble is you can't do anything to be it, because you are it. You already are. But you can do much to know it and to believe it. So we begin with knowing it and believing it. Doesn't matter what my form looks like, how mutilated it may be. I am the image and likeness of God. And therefore, this mutilated form is not the truth. Is not the truth. The Father says, you are as perfect as I. How can I take that? Father, look at me. I'm this bundle of bones. You say I'm as perfect as you. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. You've got to get out of your visible self. You've got to know your invisibility. We could talk for 5 million more years. If you stay in that visible self, you can't be the image of God. So when I say you're the image of God, I'm saying your invisibility, the light of your being, is the image and likeness of God. Now you've got the visible self and the invisibility, the perfect light and the visible rearrangement of that light into form. You've got to come out of form whether you're satisfied with it or not. If it's pretty or handsome or healthy, just look ahead 10 years, you know it won't be the same. Come out of form. I don't mean throw it away, you don't know how. I mean in your knowledge. I suppose we all make up our minds we're going to have a spiritual rebirth, but if we don't know that we've got to, we're compelled to, in order to be ourselves, then we haven't learned our lesson. We'll presume now that you and I know that we must have a spiritual rebirth. We'll even presume that some of us have started, because I know we have. Now we've got to carry this spiritual rebirth to its logical conclusion. And this is what we've got to learn. How can I finish my conversion from matter to spirit? And that's what we've got to do. So look around at your life and see, where do I have to put the emphasis? What do I have to do? What do I have to give up? Is it worth it? And the answer is very quick. Anything you give up to be spirit is worth it. It's very possible that you can have that $500,000 working for you, but you can be working on something else. The amount of money you have doesn't make you spiritual or not spiritual. Money simply isn't spirit. That doesn't mean you have to throw it away. It buys the necessities, the things you use, the things that keep you in the running and able to concentrate on being a spirit. And you'll find that there are many things you don't have to give up to live in the spirit. To live in the spirit is a way of life, an inner compulsion that converts your world into the qualities of spirit. Certainly there's no spirit in hating. So you try loving, and so forth. You find that it's easy to get the spirit moving inside you as you convert yourself to the things that are spiritual. The way you treat people, the way you live, your sharing. So many qualities you have or can have that have to do with spirit. And you can find that as you convert yourself into that kind of an individual, you're really converting yourself to spirit. It isn't you go out and you take something and say, that's matter, I don't want it, I'll change it to spirit. It's a slow development. There's nothing in spirit that is a negative. You can find the spirit in every step of human life. It's beneath the surface, concealed. The humanhood conceals it. And as you find the capacity to ferret it out, to dig in and find what is the spiritual truth there, and as you cultivate that spiritual truth, you'll find you're having a slow change of consciousness. I can't hate anyone because it hurts me. If I hate them, what can I think of? Can I call that spirit? It won't work. I find that if I don't love people, that I'm missing something in spirit. So I find I'm doing the things that build my spiritual awareness and avoiding the things that diminish my spiritual awareness. You can find places where what you do takes your spirit away. You've got to do the things that bring the spirit to you, make it active, make it visible to you. And as you live with these qualities that make the spirit visible, you feel different. It's so easy to look inside yourself and see what I can do to bring the spirit living inside me. There is no place in my consciousness that can be spirit and matter. No place. I've got to be the Spirit of God. It depends on you whether or not you're alert, whether you're trying to find out where is the spirit that I'm supposed to be. Where is not the spirit that I'm supposed to be? How do I get from one to the other? You start thinking about it, living it. Now, I know many of us have made great strides. Years ago, You were one way. I see you now, you're another way. That's wonderful. We've still got some to go, haven't we? And we can make it because we have made a lot of progress already. Now we've got to find ways and means of making more progress. One of the big ways is to eliminate the material selfhood. Oh, I've got it down a lot. There's less of it. Still got more of it to get out of the way because it's really not there. And I think it's there. I've got to get it out of the way. Now, when these two women had to give immaculate conception to themselves, they could not deal in the physical world. They had to leave it because spirit is not in the physical world. Now leave this physical world and remain in the spirit. You do it right where the world is. Consciously, spirit. Now we're going to take 15 minutes a day. And let's stay with that idea now, because the 15 minutes a day will give you life. Right now, we want to live in the spirit. I can't live in anything else and be alive. If I'm not in the spirit, I'm not alive. How can I live in the spirit? Except by knowing one thing, that spirit is my name. And when anything else enters my consciousness that is not spirit, I don't have to accept it. Now for 15 minutes, I know that's a lot of time to dwell in the spirit, but when anything enters your consciousness that is not spirit, you don't accept it. And it can be the kindliest thought, but if it's not spirit, you don't accept it. For 15 minutes. As we do that, and we're doing it now, I have only kind thoughts. If there's an unkind thought in me, I got to get rid of it right away. You're happy when you have kind thoughts. And that happiness tells you that thoughts are kind. Now, if a gloomy thought or a sad thought or an ugly thought would have crossed your mind, you'd have to get rid of it immediately. And the best way to get rid of that sad, gloomy thought is to get rid of the mind that had the thought. Because if you live in the mind, it'll be half and half. Your exercise is to get out of the mind. Eventually, you will be surprised to find yourself out of the mind completely. Sounds like an impossibility. You know it isn't, because that's the repository of all the material thought. You can't get rid of material thought without getting rid of the mind which thinks the material thought. So now, we're putting the emphasis on that which is the bearer and the preserver of the material thought we're trying to get rid of. You can be a police force of one on your own mind. I'm not going to think good thought. I'm not going to think bad thought. I'm not going to think thought. I don't have the capacity to think. Nothing can enter my mind because I don't have one. It feels funny without a mind, but you'll find something takes its place. Your soul will take the place of your mind. When you're not using it, when it's not being brought to the surface, your soul will find a way of establishing identity where you thought the mind was. And this transference of from one to the other is one of the most difficult works you have to do. To have a quiet mind, a silent mind, and no mind. And the soul will leap into the place that you have vacated. When you use the mind, you don't use the soul. When the soul is active, you don't use the mind. The mind is the cause of every problem that we face. Please work on the silent mind. Give it 15 minutes a day by starting out with changing the thoughts of the mind, and then finally coming to the place where the mind is still. And when the mind is still, really still, you find you're not ill, you're not deformed, you're not in need of changing. All that was wrong with you when you thought you were ill was your mind out-picturing what you thought you had. When the mind is not out-picturing, the soul can only deliver the image and likeness of God. Truly, that is the way you're going to eliminate the physical problems. They are all invented by your mind. I said the word invented. The only way you'll ever know that's true is if you, through the silence of your mind, can have the problem that the mind invented disappear. And you can. When Jesus healed the sick, those who couldn't walk, those who had leprosy, he never saw, it never entered his mind that they were sick. Because there was no sickness in the mind of Christ. He never looked out and saw what we see. He saw people who had invented their own sickness. Everything they had was an invention of their own mind, plus the world mind and their mind. And he had no capacity for the world mind and their mind. The Christ mind doesn't see sickness, doesn't know sickness, because it isn't there. And the Christ mind is your mind. When you see sickness, disease, all the evils of the world, you're not looking with the Christ mind. You're looking with your human mind. And you're not even a human being. God never made one. Anna and Mary reached into the kingdom of God, to the Christ. And did their miracle. When you reach into the kingdom of God and find that you have found the Christ, you find your miracle. Now everyone has the same capacity. We just have to know that we've got to do it, and how to do it, we can't miss. We all have the capacity to know the Christ. We find the Christ at the center of our being. How do we touch the Christ? You're wasting your time if you're thinking of the Christ. Your thought won't reach the Christ. How can we go deeper than our thought? We must. But the thought stands in the way. Therefore, get the thought out of the way. Eliminate the thinking mind. That's a hard thing to do when you depend on it for a living, isn't it? But your secret work is to get rid of the thinking mind. How did Joel do it? Well, he didn't have to go out and earn a living. A living usually takes a certain part of the day. Not all of it. You can earn a living, and you can eliminate your thinking mind part-time. When you eliminate it part-time, you'll find a way to eliminate more of it. You can't do everything all at once in one fell swoop. You've got to do it as you can. You've got to eliminate your mind, the last thing in the world you ever thought you'd do. But it's the one who's dreamed up all the evil in the world, all the problems. And God didn't make your human mind. So in a sense, you're coming above your human mind. You can use it down on the job. There comes a time when those 40 hours are gone and you have some time to work on yourself. Your soul isn't going to work for you down at the office, but you're going to develop your soul. Your soul is going to take you over the hump. Your soul is going to keep you out of the cemetery, not your mind. So you put your faith in your soul gradually. Gradually. Somehow, spirit doesn't have to be told how to earn a living. As you work with spirit, somehow spirit earns a living for you in ways you know not of. But your emphasis must be, I am building my awareness of soul, my awareness of Christ, my awareness of the light of God, because I am a God creature. I am permanent. Your faith in your permanence will be rewarded. You must make the conversion. In addition to the must part, it is a beautiful conversion. It is the most exciting work in the world. Every little ounce of progress is a thrill. We have one destination. There's no other. The kingdom of God, and I've got to work at it. I've got to work and work and work, and I love it, because I'm getting to that kingdom. I don't know if I've got a foot in it or not, but you feel closer to it, and you know you're closer. It's not a game, not imagination. You're closer to the kingdom of God with every ounce of spirit that you breathe. I think we've had enough for tonight.
Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into our channel. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to hit that like button below. It really helps us out. And why not share this video with your friends? Spread the word and help us reach more people. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notifications so you never miss a new video from us. Thanks for watching and see you next time.